What's humorous, do you, when people see your Instagram stories or the rare post about a date night? They always assume they know you really know you, however. You might be surprised to learn about the extensive activities that occur in the background. In any case, my name is Whitney, I'm 34 and I live in Indiana, which is one of those places where everything seems the same everywhere you look: drive-thrus, Walmart stores, and cornfields. That's a summary of my life. Chad and I have been wed for 5 years. He's all right. I won't sit here and criticize my spouse or anything. He's a decent man who is trustworthy and stable. He is employed at a hardware store as a manager. It pays the bills, but it's not glamorous. However, when we first started dating, Chad wasn't exactly my ideal partner. I had recently ended a brief with a man I was really in love with, but he had no intention of getting married, to be honest. Waiting around for him to figure it out was too much for my self-esteem. He must have felt safe when Chad arrived. At the time, being married felt like enough, even though he wasn't very romantic or thrilling together. We have had a life. We rent a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. It's cozy, but not much. I'm fairly adamant that we don't have children. I've put far too much effort into maintaining my physical fitness since college to simply discard it all due to stretch marks and restless nights. That may sound self-centered, but I don't. After all, it's my body, my decision. At least Chad acts like he's okay with it. To be honest, I believe he simply enjoys evading accountability. The problem is that I've always my ideal life. And let's just say it doesn't involve worrying about grocery budgets or staying up late watching my husband play Call of Duty. Please understand that I like Chad. He's in silly, and when I'm feeling down, he'll make me laugh with this silly little dance. However, there are moments when I just stare at him and ask myself, is this it? I mean, am I really married to a man who considers going to Applebee's to be a huge night out? Anyway, the gym can help with that. Although I've always been interested in fitness, I've really stepped it up in the past year. I'm referring to 6 in the morning. Exercise, protein drinks, monitoring my macronutrients, etc. Chad was encouraging at first, but when I started receiving more attention, especially online, I could tell it bothered him. Guys I went to high school with would always comment on my gym selfies, complimenting me on my appearance or asking what my secret was. I could feel the insecurity slipping in, even though Chad would laugh about it. Josh, my gym companion, comes next. He is 29 years old, absurdly fit, and drives a brand new truck that most likely costs more than our annual rent. He saw me doing the bench press a few months back, and we clicked right away. He is self-assured, humorous, and adept at boosting my self-esteem, things that Chad hasn't said to me in years, if at all, including you don't look a day over 25, and you've got the kind of discipline most people dream of. Initially, it seemed harmless, just two individuals exercising together and encouraging one another to improve. Then, however, we began texting. Nothing special, just fitness advice, memes, and the like. If I claimed it didn't make me feel a little giddy, though, I would be lying. Before, I didn't look forward to going to the gym, but now I do. Before I left, I would take extra time to choose my attire or do my hair in case I were to run into him. Of course, Chad saw he's not a moron. I would dismiss his remarks by saying things like, it's the only time I can fit it in, or I'm just trying to stay healthy for us. However, the truth was that I was going for Josh now, not just for my workouts. He would say things like, you spend more time at the gym than you do with me, or do you really need to go that late? You're right, I get what you're thinking. I should not be acting this way since I'm married. But I can't help it at the same time. I feel like I'm being seen for the first time in a very long time. Not just as a wife or a woman who makes sure the laundry is done and the bills are paid, but as Whitney, myself. A woman who isn't simply another dull married 30-something in the Midwest, who nonetheless has a spark and attracts attention. When Chad's friend Tyler joined the same gym a few weeks ago, things began to change, if that makes sense. Tyler is one of those men who is constantly present but never truly in the spotlight. I wouldn't describe us as close, but he's decent enough in any case. When I initially saw him there, I didn't give it much thought. I simply waved and continued working out. Then I noticed that he was observing me, or more precisely, observing Josh and me. At first, I didn't give it much thought, but now I can't get rid of the thought that Tyler might have spoken to Chad. Lately, he has been acting strangely, becoming quieter than usual and devoting even more time to his games. He simply grumbled something about being on a mission. When I asked if he wanted to watch a movie with me last night, I dismissed it, but now I'm curious to see if he's putting the pieces together. I'm not actually doing anything wrong. I am just buddies with Josh, alright, it's innocent. But we could flirt a little. In reality, I never went over the boundary. I do love Chad. But is the desire to feel alive once more really that bad? To feel like someone's wife, but more? Have you ever been walking on thin ice and kept reassuring yourself that everything was great? Since it hadn't cracked yet, I've been experiencing something similar lately, although Josh and I have only flirted thus far. I can already see that things are beginning to veer toward a sticky area. The problem is that, for the most part, I don't even feel bad about it when I enter in the door. Chad seldom glances up from his games and doesn't inquire about my day. And if I'm being completely honest, in his mind, Tyler had repeated it repeatedly. Are you good? I asked, trying to sound casual. As he finally got up and entered the kitchen, taking a soda from the refrigerator without glancing at me. Yeah, he snapped. I shrugged. Why wouldn't I be? He smiled tightly at me and left the living room without saying anything more. You just seem quiet tonight. I realized then that I needed to get ahead of this. It was my responsibility to ensure that I was in charge of the story if Tyler was sowing doubt. When Chad was getting ready for work the following day, I mentioned Josh. I tried to make it seem inconsequential when I added that I had been working out with someone at the gym at first. Chad remained silent and simply nodded as if he was waiting for me to continue. I leaned against the restroom door and murmured, "His name is Josh." Chad stopped shaving in the middle and glanced at me in the mirror. Just a gym buddy, you know? Someone to keep me accountable. I shrugged and forced a laugh. Why didn't you mention him before? I asked. I could see the wheels turning in his head as his jaw tightened, and he said, I didn't think it was a big deal. I mean, you never really ask about my gym stuff. When he eventually said, Tyler mentioned seeing you with him, I felt sick to my stomach, but I maintained a neutral expression. He said you weren't wearing your ring. I rolled my eyes and replied, oh, come on. I take my ring off when I work out because it digs into my finger, you know that. His tone was rougher than I had anticipated and he yelled back, do I? With my arms crossed, I said, Chad, seriously. You're going to make this a thing because Tyler's bored and wants to stir up drama? It's not about Tyler, he answered with a higher voice. I tried to look frustrated as I groaned. It's about you not telling me about this guy. How long have you been working out with him? A couple of months. It's not like I was hiding it. Chad, you're just so busy with your games, you don't even notice half the stuff I do. That's not fair. He said, staring at me. You could have told me, and you could have asked. I snapped back. But you don't. You never ask how my day was or what's going on in my life. So yeah, maybe I didn't mention Josh. But it's not like you've been paying attention anyway. That silenced him. I knew I had one. And I could see the remorse creeping in. The last bit was obviously a lie, but I shrugged and told him, look, if it bothers you, I'll stop working out with him. But honestly, Chad, I just wish you'd care about my life the way he does. Chad didn't need to know that Josh didn't know anything about my life outside of the gym. Was his fault for not being a better husband. In his opinion, like most of our disputes, it began with Chad silently stewing as I went about my business. Assuming I had diffused the issue, I believed I had played my cards correctly after our brief argument regarding Josh. Chad was different even though he appeared to drop it. When he believed I wasn't listening, he would give me these prolonged, inquisitive glances, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. He simply shrugged his shoulders and claimed to be all right every time I inquired about his well-being. I believed that I was safe, of course. Tyler had sown doubt, but Chad was now aware of Josh. I had presented it as though I had been honest about everything, and Chad's suspicions were merely the result of insecurities. When you know what buttons to press, men are very easy to control. I believed that all I needed to do was make him feel bad for not being more involved in my life, and the matter would be essentially forgotten. Josh, however, was becoming more confident. He began praising me more, staying a little later after our workouts. And one evening he jokingly proposed that we go out to dinner. I was initially hesitant because I was aware of how it may appear. Not because I felt bad, because I had long before persuaded myself that this was not dangerous. But when Josh said, come on, it's just dinner, and grinned at me with that effortless assurance, I couldn't help myself. Dinner ended up being a late night, but I assured myself it was okay. Josh asked if I wanted to return to his apartment. After the meal, he smiled and added, "I've got some wine," and before I could stop myself, I replied yes. His apartment was sleek, modern, and immaculate, exactly the kind of place Chad and I could never afford. As I followed Josh to the couch, I didn't even consider Chad. Before I knew it, one thing led to another and one glass of wine became two. It was nearly 11 p.m. when I finally made it home. When I eventually checked my phone, I discovered 3 missed calls and a few texts from Chad. I had completely lost count of time. A knot formed in my stomach, but I ignored it. He didn't need to know where I was or what I was doing, I assured myself. He was simply being dramatic. He was sitting on the couch with his arms folded and his jaw clenched when I entered the room. "Where were you?" he said in a clipped, low voice. I said, "I told you I was at the gym," putting my bag down by the door and averting his eyes. He got up and loomed over me, his eyes flaming. "Until 11 at night," he asked. "Don't lie to me." "Whitney, I'm not lying," I yelled, growing defensive in my tone. "I stayed late to stretch." "What's the big deal?" I froze when he said, "The big deal," his voice now trembling, "is that you've been acting shady as hell for weeks. And now you're coming home with a hickey on your neck." I had overlooked that. In an attempt to hide it, I touched my neck out of reflex, but it was too late. I responded, "You're being ridiculous," in a tremulous voice. "It's not what you think. Don't you dare gaslight me." Chad slammed his hand down on the coffee table and yelled forth, "Do you think I'm stupid? Who is he? Josh? Is it him?" With my heart pounding, I yelled, "Chad, stop. You're blowing this way out of proportion," he said with a sour laugh while stroking his hair throughout. "Out of proportion? Are you kidding me? You've been lying to me for months, Whitney." I didn't want to believe it. But now it all makes sense. I put up with so much crap from you, but this is too much, far. His words hurt, but I refused to go back down. I retorted, "You're not perfect either, Chad. You ignore me, you don't make me feel special. And you spend more time with your stupid games than you do with me. Maybe if you actually cared about our marriage, I wouldn't have to look for attention somewhere else." That was an incorrect response. Snatching up his jacket, he hurried out of the room and slammed the bedroom door shut. I was so angry that I snatched up my keys and walked out without even telling him where I was going. My best friend didn't pick up when I called her. I then tried my mother, but it didn't work either. Shaking and desperate, I dialed Josh. I said, "Hey," and when he answered, my voice broke. He answered, of course, with a worried tone, "Can I come over? I need to get out of here. Come over, we'll talk." I sobbed as I told Josh everything, or at least my version of it. When I finally arrived at his house, I portrayed Chad as emotionally unavailable, aloof, and inattentive. I kept my deceit and manipulation of Chad a secret from Josh for months. Josh listened silently, his face darkening with each word. He shook his head after I was done. He remarked, "You're married," in a chilly tone. I said, "I'm sorry," with tears in my eyes. "You didn't think that was something I should know?" Josh chuckled coldly. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't mean for this to happen." I started to say, "Whitney," but Josh interrupted me. "Didn't mean for what to happen? For you to cheat on your husband? For me to sleep with a married woman? What else haven't you told me? You're a horrible person, you know that? You lied to me, you lied to your husband, and now you're sitting here crying like you're the victim. Do you even hear yourself?" I was unable to speak. His remarks were like a kick to the stomach. It felt like a kick in the face to hear it from Josh, someone I believed cared about me. Even if I had persuaded myself that I was justified and wasn't actually doing anything wrong. Josh flatly stated, "You should leave." I was devastated as I left Josh's place. "Go home and figure out your mess. Try to save your marriage if that's even possible. But don't think for a second that I'm going to be part of any more." The following morning, I arrived home to find Chad seated at the kitchen table, his face drawn and pale. When I entered, he didn't even give me a glance. Silently, "I didn't sleep," he said. "I was up all night thinking about everything, and I need to know, Whitney, did you ever love me?" "Of course I did," I replied quickly. I continued without thinking, I do." Chad's face twisted, and I saw him cry for the first time in years. His shoulders trembled as he buried his face in his hands. He remarked, "That's it, isn't it?" I was at a loss for words when I said, "That's why you never wanted kids. You never really wanted a life with me, although I knew it wouldn't matter." I still wanted to console him and help him feel better. He saw through me. He looked up at last, and his eyes we were divorcing, he declared firmly, red and swollen. No. I blurted out, we can figure out, we can go to therapy, there's nothing to figure out. He said. I attempted to protest, but I knew in my heart that he was correct when he said, you cheated on me. You lied to me, you made me feel like I wasn't enough, and now I know I never was, is over. Whitney, there was no way out of this, I had to deal with the fallout after I ruined our marriage. I used to believe that divorces only occurred between individuals who detested one another, between couples who battled daily, hurled dagger-like insults, and couldn't endure being in the same room. It wasn't loud or dramatic, though. When Chad and I decided on ours, it was quiet and heavy, like we were standing on opposite sides of a bridge that I had burned, watching it fall apart. I won't lie, the procedure was brutal. During the divorce, I made an effort to fight for as much as I could. I reasoned that I could persuade myself that things weren't that horrible. If I could at least gain some financial stability. Chad, however, would not have it, a good lawyer, one that I could never afford. Ultimately, all I took with me was my car, half of the money in our joint account, and a box of memories I'd prefer not to revisit. Chad retained his dignity above all else. Along with the flat and furniture, I didn't care. I told myself, for a while, I even told myself that I would be better off after this. You mean I was free? Without the limitations of marriage, I was free to live my life as I pleased. However, a few months later, the truth struck me like a freight train. I was alone, entirely, absolutely, suffocatingly alone. I was not free. Shortly after we had a major argument, Josh abandoned me. I suppose I shouldn't be shocked. He informed me that I wasn't who he believed me to be after I told him everything, and he couldn't envision a future with someone who would lie and cheat so readily. He didn't believe me when I tried to explain that I wasn't actually like that. To be honest, I don't believe I purchased it either. I knew in my heart that he was correct. After that, I stopped going to the gym. I felt physically ill at the idea of entering and seeing everyone who knew me and had me with Josh. I had the impression that the walls of that place were whispering back to me all of my faults. I chose to remain at home instead. I initially promised myself that I would exercise at home, but in reality, I lacked the energy. I began to feel like I had failed, and the weight I had fought so hard to lose began to creep back on. Late at night, I would browse Instagram and see old photos of Chad and me when we were still together. I couldn't help but observe how much more worn out and swollen my face appeared today than it had been then. I had lost all of my confidence and the spark I once possessed. I didn't miss the irony. I ruined my marriage in an attempt to feel noticed. I never felt more invisible than I did today. Chad, meanwhile, was not getting any better. Rumor had it that he had taken some time off work to take care of himself, but in reality, he was just attempting to put his life back together. Before I blocked him, Tyler informed me that Chad was in therapy and not seeing anyone. I was devastated by the idea of him sitting in a sterile office and opening up to a complete stranger in a way I never imagined was possible. He was left to bear the consequences of my severe hurt, while I attempted to act as though nothing had happened. I told myself it was just a way to unwind, so I started drinking more than I should have. However, those 2 wine glasses quickly escalated to 3, then 4, and before long, I was experiencing headaches nearly every morning. I would hardly recognize the person staring back at me when I looked in the mirror. My complexion had lost its radiance, my stomach was less flat, and my one-stoned arms were now mushy. I appeared worn out, exhausted, and depleted. Every man I met felt like a pale imitation of what I believed I deserved, even though I attempted dating. In actuality, I had lost any sense of what I want. I only knew that no one I encountered seemed to be as the mental image of Chad that I had begun to form. The pleasant recollections that I had suppressed during my pursuit of Josh continued to surface. I would recall the silly dances Chad would perform when he thought no one was looking, or how he used to bring me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. Those memories plagued me even though I didn't deserve them. A year or so after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Chad at a grocery store one evening. He was in the fruit department, picking out avocados with care, as he always did and didn't first notice me. I watched him, locked in place. He appeared smaller and possibly more dejected. But he also had a calm strength that had not been there before. When a woman approached him with a shopping basket, I saw how his face brightened. I was on the verge of approaching him. She was attractive in a straightforward, subtle way, the kind of attractive that can be demonstrated without the need of filters or selfies taken in the gym for a brief moment. I caught a glimpse of my Chad, the old Chad, as she said something that made him giggle. However, he was no longer mine. I didn't buy anything before I went. I sobbed all the way home that evening. I'm 36 years old, unmarried, and totally lost right now. I had hoped that the divorce would provide me a fresh start, but instead it left me stuck in a life that I hardly know. I'm stuck here repeating all of my poor choices like a broken record while Chad has moved on. Or at least is making an effort to do so. The worst thing? I am aware of what I have done to myself. I destroyed my ex-husband, I destroyed my marriage, and I destroyed life in the process. I'm not sure if Chad will ever forgive me completely. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to forgive myself. I will always remember the expression on his expression the evening he informed me that he desired a divorce, the heartache, the rage, the suffering. Every time I close my eyes, I see that, and I know deep down that I will always remember that for the rest of my life, regardless of how much time goes by.